Hello again, everyone, and welcome to another Inside Lowell podcast. I am your host, Teddy Panos, coming to you from the WellPoint Studios here in downtown Lowell. Unicare is now WellPoint. New name, same commitment to Massachusetts and to its members. At WellPoint, your whole health is their whole point. And I thank our friends at WellPoint for helping to make this podcast, all of our Inside Lowell podcasts possible, along with the rest of our podcast sponsors, our friends at the Washington Savings Bank. Make the switch now to Washington Savings Bank. TMI Properties, from affordable to luxurious, apartments for all. Boston North Company, business solutions for restaurant and retail. Mahoney Oil, providing warmth and protection for nearly a century. Francis E. Preventure Insurance, the agency Greater Lowell has counted on for 41 plus years. And by the Massachusetts Pirates, bringing all the hard-hitting action and excitement of arena football to the Tsonga Center on the campus of UMass Lowell. And with that, I want to welcome in my guest for this podcast. He is a city councilor here in the city of Lowell. You might recognize him. Corey Robinson is joining us here in the WellPoint Studios. Good morning, Councilor. How are you?
Good. Good morning, Teddy. Good morning, Inside Lowell, and good morning, City of Lowell.
All right. Good to have you here. It's been a while since we've caught up, and I know you reached out. You watched the Pod Squad we did, where you and a couple of your colleagues were the major topic, and you said you wanted to clear out some misconceptions, and I certainly want to give you an opportunity to do that. But before we do that, this is our first chance that we've had to talk on air about the charges against you from last November. Where do you stand with that case, and are the allegations against you true?
So I can't really get into details of it. It is still ongoing. Again, as my attorneys explained, charges are untrue, and it's going through the judicial process, and we're just waiting till the truth will be shaken out for the public to understand what really happened with these allegations.
Are you surprised that here we are, it's July 5th that we're recording this, 8 months later, 9 months, I think it's 8 months later, this is still an active case?
I mean, yes and no. I think with allegations serious in nature like this, I'm glad to see that they're really making sure and dotting their I's and crossing their T's and taking this serious, as I do as well.
But you're confident when the case is resolved that you will be found innocent of all charges, or maybe even dropped? Is that?
I'm pretty confident that this will be resolved, and we can have a lengthy discussion at that point with more detail.
Fair enough. Has it affected your ability to do your job, or the way you're doing your job as a city councilor?
I mean, initially it did affect due to the actions of others, I'd say. But as far as me still being able to work in the district, communicate with my neighbors, bring their concerns forward, no, not at all. As you see, the motions, I've still been working, plugging away. I've been criticized about the amount of motions I put forward, so absolutely not. I was able to help work with the neighborhood group, help facilitate them to receive a grant from the city for open space improvements and art, and we just accomplished a great mural over in Centerville that's pretty reflective of the district, the residents that make up the district. Been plugging away. We've still been addressing all the challenges that are brought to my attention. The Billing Street speed bumps, which catching on like wildfire. I'm getting requests from residents all over. What's the process involved to install some of those? So, I mean, yeah, I think the work itself has never let up.
Does the aftermath of what happened, and your colleagues, a number of whom asked you to step aside for a period of time, when you didn't do that, they then started kind of, I don't want to say shunning you, but they started tabling your motions and then just kind of not dealing with them before eventually business got back to normal, except that it does seem that there is some leftover acrimony, resentment as a reaction to that, and especially between you and some of your colleagues that did call for you to step aside. Is that accurate? Is that an accurate reflection of what people are kind of seeing and commenting about?
I mean, the thing is with me is something my grandparents told me a long time ago is when people show you who they are, you can't get upset or be mad at them. You just have to deal with it accordingly. And some of my colleagues when this first happened, I sent out a text to my colleagues, just asking them, listen, I know this is serious allegations. I can't comment on it because it is open. It's ongoing. Please allow time through the judicial process to play out. So this is resolved. I'm innocent of these charges. And all I ask is you just make informed decisions, sit patiently and wait, and let it play out. That's all. And then I'll continue to work. I didn't get a reply. And then the next thing I know, step aside, step aside, step aside. I mean, some of the people that I'm sharing space with as a colleague, they've had their own stuff in their past that's, whether it's false, true, I don't know. I don't have the information on it, and nor is it my business. But I'm the type of person that if a colleague has something similar situation as this, and then they reach out and say, I didn't do this or whatever it may be, they say just, take your time, be patient, make an informed decision. In the meantime, I'm going to continue to work. That's what I'm going to do.
Have there been criminal charges against any of your colleagues?
Oh, yes. And that's not my place to say that, but other people have gone through adversities that are currently sitting in the seat, and they should understand whether or not, I know one instance in particular that I guess the charges were dismissed after 4 years, but, again, it's if you've gone through these kind of challenges in your personal life, you should understand what it's like to be in a position where you cannot publicly advocate or tell your side of the story until the situation is resolved.
Okay. Have you held it against them? Do you hold it against your colleagues that they didn't do as you asked them to do and not comment or not do anything, just wait for everything to play out?
No, because again, people have that freedom, that ability to act and think and speak and do their actions. It's autonomy accordingly, whatever they feel is right at the time and for whatever reason. And it's not my place to figure out why they do or don't do something. It's just as a colleague, I reached out asking for their support in that way. It didn't go that way, which is fine. They felt the best interest of whatever it was. They'd handle it the way they did. So no big problem. I mean, at the end of the day, I got involved in all this more so for improvements for the residents. I mean, that's a lot of this other stuff are just distractions. But it's realistically, my focus is on improvements for the residents, improvements to the city. I myself, born and raised here, love this city, and that's why I'm involved.
Okay. You said you wanted to clear up some misstatements, misconceptions, things that we said during the Pod Squad podcast going back to, was it June 26th, I believe, was the date. What in particular did we say or infer that you believe wasn't accurate?
So, and it's not necessarily not accurate. A lot of the conversations that surfaced around facilities, that surfaced around the hiring practices, that surfaced around the culture of the city of Lowell that's existed for quite some time. I mean, everyone's going to have a different perspective. And my lived experience, my background, a 15-year City of Lowell employee, 5 years in another community now, municipal work, union leadership, 8-9 years of that in the City of Lowell. I'm coming from a different background, different perspective than most. So I've heard comments made like, a little bit of cronyism or a little bit of nepotism. It happens everywhere. I've heard, well, why would you want to be the first to say, no, this isn't right, I don't want to do it, and kind of be the lightning rod, so to say. That's the problem, is that people aren't willing to change that culture, or they're willing to accept that culture. And this isn't, I don't come from a place where I've really ever looked for personal gain. I'm coming from a place from first a labor leader. And I can't tell you how many grievances and how many times I had employees, members reaching out to me that have dedicated 20, 30 years of their life working for, say, the city of Lowell, and there's a ladder set up for advancement. Once they start getting to, middle to upper rungs on that ladder, it's ripped out from under them because of, again, that culture, because of, again, so-and-so knew somebody. And then there's a gray area called the management's rights clause in most contracts. It gives the leeway for management to be the sole determinant judge of qualifications, which doesn't really make sense because they can adjust that accordingly. In some instances, it should be carved out, concrete. These are the qualifications required because this is your responsibilities, this is going to be your duties. So that's where the cronyism, nepotism, it's not about personal gain. It's more so it decimates the morale. It decimates the workforce, especially those in the trenches, because they have nothing to look forward to. In addition to that, you repeatedly lose some great people time and time and again because continuously getting overlooked for advancement. And I mean, these are people that have dedicated some time with the hopes of being promoted, and that's where I think we need to have a real conversation. I think we talk about retention, we talk about increase in salaries and wages to attract new talent. But once you get that new talent here, if there's no long-term opportunity for these people to advance, why would they stay? Regardless of the pay scale temporarily now. I mean, I put in 7 years, 10 years, whatever it may be, in a position, an opportunity pops up for a higher grade kind of next level management or whatever it may be in that area, and the rug's pulled out from under me. And now I have a decision to make. Like, do I keep sticking around in a situation like this where it is a lot who you know, and how can they adjust the job description to fit the person that they kind of want? And that's where I think you saw our first term, Councilor 𝒔𝒊𝒐𝒔 and myself immediately called for personnel subcommittee to start trying to work and address this stuff, like implementation of some of the best practice recommendations from the Clifton Larson, applicant tracking systems. All of these things factor in. And I think if we are going to become, or we're looking to become, a great employer, that's one of the areas we need to clean up. And I think there have been some strides there, but I don't think nearly enough. And I think you still continue to see it play out.
Okay. A lot there that I want to kind of get your thoughts on, and I'm going to push back a little bit here. You first burst onto public consciousness really as a kind of political force in Lowell. It was during the summer of 2020, the aftermath of the George Floyd situation, when you took to social media and put out a post that you were passed over for a job because of racism. I reached out to you. I don't think we'd ever spoken before unless we'd run into each other at some events around the city, but you came in, we did a radio interview, and you kind of, said it was probably more cronyism and nepotism.
Yeah, and in that post, if you read it,
right?
I didn't specifically point my finger at racism. Was that a factor? Again, I don't know. That's time and time again, you look around and you see it. And I'm not sitting here saying that was why or that isn't why. It's do all of these things factor in? Is it because minority groups aren't out at the golf courses on the putting green and building those networks and relations? I don't know what the dynamic is, but whatever that perfect storm is, we're repeatedly overlooking qualified candidates.
But the issue that I've had back then and even to this day is that when you throw those words out there, cronyism, nepotism, the insinuation is, especially to the general public, that the people who have gotten those jobs aren't qualified for them. I mean, so in the hiring, in your particular case, I don't know the specifics when you got passed over, but it seems that it's become personal for you because you experienced something, you thought you were qualified for a job, you didn't get that job. That's a different thing than saying the person who got it isn't qualified. And you born and raised in Lowell. You know that everybody knows everybody, right? Everybody's had somebody, a relative, serve in either city council, school committee, or somewhere at City Hall, or they've had so-and-so as a teacher or in the school department, whatever. Everybody's connected. Your own father worked for the city, did he not, or no?
Never.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I apologize for that. I thought that your father worked for the city.
No.
No. Okay. I apologize for that. But he was relatively known throughout the city, correct?
Well, my father's born and raised here too.
Correct.
He went to Greater Lowell, ULowell on football and track scholarship. He played football at Lowell High. Like, he's known from relationships and networking growing up in the city. Like, he had nothing to do with anything to do work wise with the city.
But you benefited from his relationships, and not benefits. People knew who you were because of his relationships, much like people knew who I was because of my father's business,
Well,
etc.
I mean, people kind of knew who I was because I was a 15-year City of Lowell employee and an 8-year 1705 president. So, I mean, it's two different worlds. I mean, my father, a lot of the people that ended up working within the city, I would meet years after, and they'd be like, "Oh, that's your father. I went to school with him." But it wasn't. I came in the door as a laborer. I was basically told, if you don't study and get your CDL license, there's no job opportunity for you. And I mean, I did what I had to do. So that was, and that's the thing. It's if we're really gonna have a real conversation about qualifications, then let's look at the qualifications that are required for a lot of these positions, as I touched on earlier. Now, to hire somebody that's qualified, regardless if they know somebody or not, it's not a problem, because at the end of the day, they're going to achieve the outcome. The work's going to be done. When the work's not getting done, then there's a problem. And does it come down to qualifications at that point? I mean, just pick a job out there in the city. And you can see, look at some of the areas we're struggling. Now, if the people were qualified, we wouldn't see the volume of problems that we're having in certain areas. And that's just the reality of it. That's universal. I mean, qualified people are going to rise to the challenge and address the challenges that are before them, because they have the skill set, they have the qualifications to address whatever issues they're struggling with. And if they don't have the resources available to address those, they're going to be able to communicate that effectively up the chain of command and work to get those resources and address the challenges that they're facing. When we're seeing shortfalls repeatedly in certain areas, then that begs a serious question here.
All right, and you've pointed out those shortfalls, and that was one of the things we talked about on that podcast as well, that you guys, that you and Councilor 𝒂𝒅, to a large degree, take a lot of this stuff out to social media. Mm-hmm. And my contention is that starts to become counterproductive.
Yes and no, because I can show you, I mean, if we went back since I was first elected, 36 times I've tried to go a chain of command. And I don't think we as a city should be operating in the manner where we're putting out small fires and go back to business as usual. And that's what you see happen. And so I found when you put a social media post and bring in the public for that conversation, now a lot of people don't like that public pressure. They're so used to the culture being sweep it under the rug and everyone's great and pat them on the back and off they go back to business as usual. Once the public starts to open up their eyes and realize where these inefficiencies are, now it exposes the disease as opposed to the symptoms. And these are all symptoms of the disease. Repeated problems, same areas. And so 36 times I've seen a post go up on social media. It's stop, drop everything, and within the next 2 days, it's all hands on deck, and they resolve that small fire. But we find ourselves in the same position where we just keep doing that process. It's address this small fire, allow the coals to smolder in the background still until the next fire pops up. We need to really look at the entire operation to address these, to put a hold or minimize the amount of these small fires that keep bursting.
There are colleagues of yours who will say, I get the same thing accomplished with a phone call. I don't have to go to social media and post photos of grass growing on a baseball infield, or of somebody, a worker doing something out on the roads.
Well, let's take a look around the city. Are we providing equal level of service citywide? What happens in their district, I don't know. I'm not going to speak on other districts, but I know Centerville's not receiving equal level of service in some areas, in many areas. And so, I mean, my colleagues, if they want to, again, when I got involved in this, transparency is a huge thing. That's something that the residents want is transparency in their local government, and rightfully so. I think they deserve it. So these backdoor phone calls, I should not have to call. And again, there are low-hanging fruit, small, whether it's a pothole, whether it's a specific issue at a park, whether it's, the smaller things. I probably have 50 to 60 messages that I've sent to the assistant manager of operations, who's our contact person assigned by the manager himself, to address these. And he's super responsive. But again, I was an employee for 15 years here. And in the past, if counselors had to reach out to the manager's office regarding some of these small, low-hanging fruit challenges that keep popping their head up, the department heads would be in trouble. I mean, I've seen it in the past, as many of you can remember. Bernie came in and he was looking to axe Tom Belgard, longtime department head, because these complaints, we don't hire a manager and his team to have to address grass being too high, a pothole here and there. Something's wrong in that process if we're bringing in a $230,000, $240,000 a year employee that's supposed to be meeting with organizations to try to bring money, resources into our city, look at large-scale development, look at, all the large-scale projects that the city's been working on, MSBA improvements, allocation of ARPA. The manager is supposed to manage the entire big picture. Then their office should not be having to pick up the phone and spend X amount of hours because counselors are calling to get grass cut or calling to get potholes filled.
But ultimately, they're responsible. Who they're the bosses of the top level, mid-level management, et cetera. Right? So ultimately, the buck stops here, as I believe it was Harry Truman who famously said. Are you saying the manager's not doing, or the manager's office isn't doing their job properly?
No, I'm saying the manager's office should not be bothered with these issues. I'm saying that operationally, there has to be a break in that chain somewhere, and I'm looking forward to the manager's office correcting these issues. And we've had these conversations. Again, it's when maybe the first 5 times, if it's stuff, okay, you call over and hey, it rained 3 days last week. They're behind schedule. Totally understandable. Stuff happens. That's not a problem at all. You don't blame anybody. When it's an ongoing problem, now it's like, okay, do I continue to make the phone calls to try to have it addressed from the top tier, or do we have a public conversation about it? I personally built out my social media throughout my campaigns. And I remember being told, oh, social media is not the way to go. People don't really. That's not true, because you can have a two-way conversation at any time on any issue, and it engages the public. So I'm not pointing fingers. I'm saying at the end of the day, we have some operational deficiencies. And I work in an environment, same thing in the community I'm in now. There's no way my bosses would be on Easy Street if complaints from the residents were coming in to the manager's offices. It's just, that's no way to operate.
Sounds like a criticism of the manager, though, that you've repeated, you're saying repeated issues over and over again, and they're not getting taken care of. Well, ultimately, that falls on the manager's office, doesn't it? And that's who you guys control. The day-to-day operations, the council's supposed to not be a part of. But, and I get, you call with recommendations from residents, but, hiring, firing, that kind of stuff, that's the manager.
It is, ultimately, but it's also whoever the manager assigns to address these issues, and that's in-house. That's his purview, that's his job. I don't know who he's having address these issues within his organizational structure, and that's not my business. That's not my role. My role is, what do we need to provide for resources or policy that's going to help these challenges go away? Because, again, whether it's 9 motions in a week or if it's 2 motions in a week, people will point the finger at, oh, it's too many motions. Well, why don't we have a real conversation? Why don't we look at why are so many motions having to be filed? It's because there's a break in the services we're providing that's leading to this volume of motions. The services start to get provided routinely and more proactively. The volume of motions start to go down. I mean, that's the way under a planning form of government it's going to work, especially with a district system. I don't just pull requests for stop signs out of thin air and different things along those lines. I receive and field the phone calls from my neighbors. And then that, in my opinion, needs to come in the form of a motion because A, you're showing the neighbors that you're responsive. B, a stop sign or some traffic related stuff, that's not just as easy as clicking your fingers and doing it in some areas, because there is studies that need to be done. There's data that needs to be provided that support your request. So it's good to have, again, transparency and show. I think our transportation engineer is amazing. And I love how she will get up at the podium and give an explanation. So now those watching at home that have reached out with this individual motion understand the process involved with all similar kind of motions. So that way it's kind of an educational piece for a lot of the residents.
We're chatting with Lowell City Councilor Corey Robinson. He's joining us here in the WellPoint studios, and we thank him for that. Let me give you an example of why I think social media is not the right place to have some of the discussions that are being had. First, I don't think everything you have been posting is completely accurate. I very famously, in that podcast, I showed photos of parks in Chelmsford that look an awful lot like the photos that you have been posting about parks in Lowell. I would venture to say that the realities of government in 2024 make it impossible for communities to do the job as it was once done, barring some significant volunteer parental baseball field involvement in actually doing some of those jobs. I think if we went around and took photos of parks everywhere, we'd find it. Lowell has 92 some odd parks if I went to the website.
Pieces of green space. But can I ask you something? That analysis is based on what?
What I've seen.
Exactly. Outside looking in. I've been on the inside looking out. And the difference is we've accomplished to maintain this amount of green space. We haven't increased the green space in Lowell with less employees and worse equipment. We've made investments in better equipment and they have more employees now. You know what the difference was? The style of management and accountability. Again, complaints weren't going to the manager's office. We had department heads that were aggressively proactive. We had department heads that when the state would give grant money in, instead of getting one project done, we'd accomplish two with the same parts. If we weren't ever accomplishing this, or if something changed significantly in responsibilities, that'd be one thing. But you bring up Chelmsford. They have one employee for the entire town. One employee to do the Parks Department work. And look at the budget of a place like Chelmsford. And now, what do they prioritize? When you have one employee, you have to pick and choose what your priorities are. Whereas Lowell, when you're investing repeatedly into equipment, employees, salaries and wages, we just gave $2, $3, and $4 an hour raises to our employees for help retention, to help all of these things we're talking about. But yet, we're getting less work, it seems like, for more money. We're spending more money for less results.
So thank you for highlighting that post, because that's an example of exactly what I was talking about. Councilor 𝒔𝒊𝒐𝒔 said, well, Chelmsford has X amount Chelmsford has one employee in their entire department. Gives the insinuation that only one person is working on the ball fields of Chelmsford or on the parks or the public facilities of Chelmsford.
Or dedicated to them.
That's not true.
One person
that means that they have a different organizational structure, but Chelmsford doesn't spend just $48,000 or whatever that number was that Councilor 𝒔𝒊𝒐𝒔 put on its parks. So that's misleading on social media. Now the people who are watching this, who are seeing the criticism at home, the public, as you said, they start, well, yeah, my city is corrupt. My city's employees are lazy. They don't do their job. That's the perception that comes out, to the point where on one of the posts, and I forget which one it was, they now started personally attacking the employees, including the child of a councilor who you're pretty fond of. And that's what I'm trying to say, is that you're, by going to social media with this, you're kind of feeding the negative beast out there. And I get it. Talk radio does it to some degree. Social media does it.
Though, and realistically, again, it's why are people shying away from having these conversations? Do we want to portray ourselves or falsely market and advertise? Oh, no, we don't have these problems at Lowell Law. These problems exist because of A, B, and C, which, again, excuses. You hear plenty of excuses why you can't accomplish.
The conversations aren't always accurate is what I'm trying to say. The way they're being portrayed. There isn't always a black and white. There's often like a gray area. There's an explanation.
Oh, I know there's a gray area.
You know, why didn't a road get paved when it was supposed to get paved? Well, it rained for 3 days.
That's totally understandable.
That's okay. But that's not the discussion that's being had on social media.
The discussion
when the initial post goes out, the negative impression is there, and it's coming from counselors. It's one thing if an idiot like me does it or a private citizen does it. You're never going to stop that. Social media can become a cesspool like that. But when it comes from people in government, now it really starts to like, oh, yeah, see, even Councilor so-and-so thinks so, or such and such employee thinks so.
As a resident, though, as a resident and a counselor, I mean, let's have honest conversations. When you show up at a park because you're there for a mural reveal and you're seeing car tires in the middle of a field that have been there, when you're seeing broken glass around our picnic tables that has been there, when you're still in June, you're still seeing leaves from the fall composting along your baseball field fence lines. How do you sugarcoat that? Or do you just turn a blind eye and don't discuss it because you don't want to make something look a certain type of way in the public eye? Or do you address that head on and have the conversation and then try to work on improving services to where you don't see that anymore as a result? I mean, you can call attention to it with a phone call. You can call attention to it on social media. You're still calling attention to it. The difference is by making it known with a phone call, you're still fielding the requests from your residents in your district saying, why is this happening? And you don't have that answer after you repeatedly have conversations about it. And so, you know, the whole notion of it's bad for a counselor to call it out. As a district counselor, I'm also a resident. So whether or not I was sitting on the council or not, I'm going to call it out. Why does this continue to happen? And comparing Chelmsford to Lowell doesn't even make sense. Again, go back and look. I mean, you even had Councilor Scott in here who tried to spin it that, oh, this isn't right to do, but yet she even admitted, I don't know why, but in the past, our green space was better maintained. It's a common theme. The public sees it, the council sees it. So, I mean, are we going to just continue to try to hide that and act like, oh, no, it's because of A, B, and no, we've invested more money than ever, bought better equipment, and have more people tasked with doing this. Where's the breakdown?
And yet you pointed out instances of Bernie Lynch coming in, which Bernie Lynch came in 2006. Mm-hmm. That was 18 years ago. And there were issues then. I'm going to guess there were issues 18 years before Bernie Lynch.
But the services were being provided more efficiently at that point. And if he was receiving phone calls about tires left in the park and broken glass on picnic tables, that's when the department heads, they knew, listen, this is not acceptable. They were held to a standard. There was a basic level of service that was expected and demanded from their boss. The councilors didn't have to reach out and do that because it was addressed. And so that's why I don't understand with the excuses that we keep getting from people. Oh, don't call this out. This is a bad look. What a real bad look is, take a walk around our green space and tell me what kind of experience our residents are having on a daily basis.
I will respectfully disagree that things have gotten, well, I think that things have gotten worse, but I think that's a symptom of government getting too big, too many properties, too many, and especially in Lowell, too many open spaces, parks,
it hasn't increased.
Buildings, facilities.
That has not increased. When you're talking about green space and open space, our ball field numbers have not increased since that time.
No, but other numbers have. We're seeing complaint. Well, the Lord Overpass for one we've now created green space.
But that's
there.
A state project that's under contract with a contractor to maintain that.
Hamilton Canal. There's all sorts of areas where little things are popping up. Dog parks are popping up where there weren't dog parks. Government is becoming bigger and bigger and bigger. It stands to reason it's simply not going to be able to keep up with what's expected of it.
So what would be the recommendation? I mean, that's a great point that you brought up.
Shrink government. I'm going to tell people, if you don't shrink government, if you keep expecting government to take care of everything in your life, you're screwed because government can't. And, you know, trash and recycling. We used to just have to worry about trash. Now we got to worry about trash and recycling. There are people who want to introduce composting. Yeah. Just wait till you start putting food scraps out on the street to be picked up. It's like, if you think you've got issues with grime and dirt on your city streets now and illegal dumping, just wait till you make it illegal to dump food in the trash, which is going to come, by the way. And that's what, and it's not just a city thing. I think this is, you know, the state is putting mandates on municipalities. The federal government is putting mandates on states, and it's just a huge problem. And I'm with you. If we want better parks, then we've got to like really focus on that and whatever. But it's going to come at the expense of something else, because I don't think you can grow the government enough to meet all the requirements of 2024 compared to 2004 or 1964.
Again, I don't see the increase in certain areas of the workload, especially with investment in better equipment. I mean, we did, say, perfect example, leaf removal in the fall. We did that with walk-behind blowers. We did that with backpack blowers and handheld blowers, and rakes and tops, with less people. Now, we've purchased a couple ride-on blowers. You can do the amount of work it would take 3 people 8 hours to do, you can do with 1 person in 1 hour with the right equipment. And so that's where also part of this conversation has to go. What are the best practices? I mean, in the community I work in, there's 8 of us. And we are responsible from everything from the grass to the streets to potholes to basins, all of it. So, I mean, again, I think it's coming up with a solid plan of attack and being efficient on delivering services. I'm not saying keep expanding, because in some instances, adjustments in new equipment helps that transition. I think you look around in all areas, and I think we can improve.
But the other factor is human beings are human beings, and the workforce has changed. You know, and we, you know, here in Lowell, the excuse was, well, they don't get paid enough. They can go somewhere else and get a job. We've kind of taken care of that now. So we'll see. But, you know, I'll tell you, just from viewing it from my industry, the restaurant industry, just from talking to people who are in different industries, the banking industry, whatever, the workforce is totally different. So I don't disagree with you when you say when you first started, and the people on staff at the time used to seem to do more things and get more accomplished with inferior equipment. I'm telling you, the workforce today is not the workforce it was. The kids coming out of school and whatnot, or whatever, they're not the same. The kids who are coming into city government, not necessarily the same mentality. Working conditions have changed. Working requirements have changed. You know, we're getting people pushing for 4-day work weeks. The world has changed. So again, to expect everything to be the same as it was when you started in the Parks Department, you know, it's not the same in the private sector. It's not going to be the same in the public sector either, Councilor.
A lot of that is controllable in municipalities. A lot of that starts with the culture that's created. A lot of that starts with effective leadership in that area. A lot of that starts with setting expectations. A lot of that starts with holding people accountable to live up to those expectations and adjusting those expectations so they're realistic. And again, a lot of that starts with communication over what kind of resources do you need to be able to provide this set of expectations. I mean, people wonder why municipalities struggle with providing services. It goes back to when you're continuously watering down job descriptions of positions, then the expectations are being diminished. That set of standards and requirements is being diminished. And again, is it because we have to help out people we know, or is it because people are qualified? And a lot of that is centered around a lot of this. Perfect example. When I was union president in Lowell, there's been a lot of talks about even this whole facility stuff. Now, that's one of the most broken systems that the city has seen, and no one's really having the real conversations around it. The city of Lowell owns these facilities, which is one of our largest group of assets. All facilities, city-owned buildings. Our jurisdiction squarely falls on City of Lowell. So now we have Lowell Public Schools as tenants. I know in the past, even when I was the union president, they would have, say, plumbers come in and HVAC people come in and do work in our buildings that we own. I've won settlements for the plumbers where they were ordered to pay 300, 400 hours at time and a half for work that they don't have the jurisdiction on doing. That's why we have a lands and buildings skilled tradespeople that are responsible for that. Same thing with painting, same thing with different work, carpentry work that was done in our facilities. Because if the daily maintenance doesn't get done in our facilities, we own it. Boiler system craps the bed. We call in our HVAC people. They take a look at it. They don't know what the maintenance log has been on that because they don't deal with it on a daily basis. Now, that $3, $4, $5 million replacement falls squarely on the shoulders of our taxpayers with public funds that the city has to come up with to replace that system. And then what do? We replace the system. We put people back in there again that have no jurisdiction over that facility really, except for the upkeep and daily cleanliness of it. And it's rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat. That's why our schools have been in such tough shape. That's why Councilor 𝒂𝒅 and myself has been calling for a centralized facilities department, which we received a lot of resistance on initially. And it makes no sense because we own the facilities, but yet we're not in control of who is overseeing those facilities on a daily basis or the maintenance that's being done on those facilities on a daily basis. It's two separate departments altogether, but we're the ones that's responsible for those facilities from the ground up.
And you believe the city has enough of a workforce to maintain everything it needs to maintain the 27 school buildings, what is it, 8 firehouse? How many firehouses are
I think we need to.
Do you think you have enough of enough staff to do all that properly?
I think we need to create a centralized facilities department that's a joint effort between both sides, school and city, and figure out what do we need for a workforce and what do we currently have between the two departments, and have both sides talking to each other within one department. So any work that gets done in our facilities comes out of that one department, and ultimately at the top of that pyramid, someone is responsible and accountable for all the work that gets done within those facilities, because without that, we're going to keep chasing our tail and having to invest. I just saw a post yesterday and I shared it, and I think I believe it was Manager Donahue and now Manager Golden has been following and aggressively pursuing the MSBA improvements, and I'm thankful for that because that's really helping out the students of the city. But again, you're putting $10, $12, $15 million a year into your facilities, but yet we're not managing the daily operations of it or the maintenance or the upkeep in some areas. Where's that going to get us? Are we going to be in the same boat chasing our tail 3 to 5 years down the line because there's no centralized facilities, no one knows who's doing what? And it's not about relationships. I think now the relationships between the two sides are probably functioning smoother and better than ever with communication and everything. But at the same time, organizationally, doesn't make sense to me not to have a centralized facilities department.
Okay. Well, that's an issue that needs to be worked out. And I understand it. Look, anytime you make things more efficient, combine things, I think that's a better thing. I'm not going to disagree with you. Why do so many of your issues seem to be with parks?
Because those stand out to you. That's something that if our residents bring their family to a playground, if our residents are walking their dogs, if our residents are out in public space, which we've seen, the city received 67, 70 something million in ARPA. One of the key areas that was included under that ARPA that they realized people value and people really utilize is open green space. I mean, from say spring to fall, when you live especially in Centerville, a lot of people don't have backyards. People don't have in-ground pools in their backyards. And so to get any kind of recreational opportunities with families and kids, they go into our parks. And so when they show up at a park, and as I mentioned earlier, perfect example, you bring your 2 kids to the park to play on the playground set. There's no wood fiber in there. There's garbage all over the playground. A swing is broken. The older kid wants to shoot hoops. There's no nets on the hoops. The grass isn't cut. That stands out like a sore thumb. And now it's like, wow, I go to the park with my kids and no one's maintaining it. I have a woman that walks her dog in the morning. And it's like, garbage strewn about in certain areas, and broken glass bottles. Like, all of these things jump right out at you. And so then it's like you get the calls, and hey, I thought we talked about this 10 times over. Why is this still happening? I don't have the answer.
How often can you maintain people who just throw garbage all over the place?
It's not about that. It's about better planning. So it seems like they've pulled half of the garbage barrels out there. And yes, I understand.
Because you got a problem with illegal dumping.
But listen, that only goes so far. That excuse goes so far. If you're putting 55-gallon green drums on the edge of the road in an area that doesn't really facilitate it, yes, you're going to have a problem with illegal dumping. When you're putting them in the field next to the dugouts, people aren't walking through the fields to bring their personal garbage for the most part.
You might be surprised what people will do if they find an unlocked dumpster on a private property. Let alone a city park.
Yeah. But I mean, again, I'm speaking again from lived experience. I was on the trash truck for the Parks Department for 5 years. We knew where to set up our barrels so that we're kind of minimizing the amount of residential trash that was put. The minute you put a barrel out in a isolated area towards the road, people will just pull up and throw and I don't dispute that. But again, all comes down to planning and figuring out efficient operations. You can walk from CVS on Bridge Street all the way up to Market Basket. Count how many public receptacles are there. And they wonder why there's garbage blowing around. There's with that row of businesses, if I stop in and grab a soda or something from CVS and I'm walking up, or a bottle of water, I have to hold that bottle for the most part until I either get home or I'm tossing it on the floor along that stretch. And that repeats itself in a lot of areas.
How many barrels did people get to put out in in the year 2000? Let's go to the turn of the century.
Again,
were we limited in the amount of trash we could put out?
No, see in the see in the parks, the thing is, it's not 2000 or looking back at a moment. It's about understanding the function of the services that department is responsible for providing, and a lot of these issues just recently started popping up to where it's requests by residents for more
Are there
trash.
less trash barrels between CVS and the Robinson School than there were
Absolutely
20 years ago? Absolutely. I don't remember seeing any along the way.
Absolutely, but they were more decorative back then. That's probably
why were they removed?
That's not, I don't know. And again, a lot of these areas, so we always operated on a 2-truck system. The orange truck from the street department would handle all your business districts on a daily basis. You would see them downtown all the time, I'm sure. The green parks truck serviced all of our green space, all the parks, and you knew your worst areas. So, for example, if there's tournaments, say Shed, Sheehy Park across from the ice cream stand, all of these areas, once the warm weather hits, is high volume. Residents are using that space Monday, Wednesday, Fridays. The other parks, Tuesdays and Thursdays, we had the sheets. When Steve Patel, who was a superintendent for many years, left, all of these routes and sheets were left also in the system. They've gone away from that operating system for whatever reason. And again, that's management's rights. But this current system we're operating in, I see the end result of the lack of services or I'd say the reduction of services in a lot of areas.
All right. I want to wrap it up. I've kept you for 48 minutes now. Appreciate you being here. What we saw at the last city council meeting, you guys have another one coming up in 5 days from today. Is the personal acrimony rancor over, the back and forth, and in particular between you and Councilor Dakota, his bringing up your personal situation on the council floor, which I openly said here on that pod squad that we were talking about, completely out of line. The motion thing, that's part of doing business. Personal stuff stays personal. You responded with a text message to him that has since gone public, and then there's some back and forth on that. Is that all over? Can you guys work together? Can you and folks who you at one time or another had a very good relationship with, can you guys work together for the benefit of the city from this point on? Are we done seeing the personal stuff for now?
I absolutely can work with anyone. I mean, again, in this elected seat, it's the voters decide who's sitting in these seats. I didn't pick and choose any of these people to work with, and I can work with anybody. As far as holding personal, none of this was ever even personal to me. It was, again, I sent a private text to a colleague and expressed my opinions. And in hindsight, it wasn't the best thing for the 120,000 residents. But, and I apologize to the residents if they feel like that was uncalled for, and maybe so. But I don't regret saying what I said. I mean, realistically, and I don't have a personal grudge on these people. I'm there for the work. I'm talking about, this is an opportunity for a previous employee that understands the operational aspect of it to address a lot of these challenges. And how I go about it, that's the way how I go about it.
But the personal stuff, you know, we just had a 20-minute disagreement on, you know, why the parks are the way they are or why buildings are the way they are. And we don't need to call each other crooked, corrupt, or whatever, right?
Absolutely.
We don't need to bring personal stuff from our backgrounds. You can have a respectful conversation.
Absolutely.
I think part of the issue is that when there's an insinuation that somebody is a crony or you know, dare I say corrupt? Because you'll see that coming in the comments.
I've never
You may
pointed
not
my
have
finger
said
and said corrupted anything.
but you're painting people in a way which points them as incompetent, rather than having a simple disagreement with you about how a facilities department should be run or consolidated or
Take
whatever.
the individual part out, though, and that's
personal.
the thing. See, people are personalizing a lot of this.
But you're making personal comments as part of it. When you run out on social media and insinuate something personal,
where is the
personal.
personal component? I'm speaking of a function, a service. That's what I keep commenting on. People personalize it. Just like with that motion, when colleagues started saying, oh, this is personal. We're in the middle of a situation where no one has the answers. I asked the solicitor to provide some kind of answer. Now, I hear the excuse. Well, it lands on state ethics. It shouldn't have been the solicitor to do that. So then let's look at that. My colleagues in the solicitor have had no problem having conversations and making recommendations on whether or not counselors that aren't allowed to collect their salary could donate to a nonprofit organization of their choosing. That would fall squarely on ethics as well. Oh, wait a minute. That's acceptable to discuss on the floor, but this is not, even though it was unanimously passed. And I think it's the first time I've ever seen a request for an update get voted down. And in addition to that,
because people thought it was personal, directed towards one counselor who you have had.
But it's
admittedly, you've had multiple back and forths with,
yes,
with
I have.
Councilor Leahy.
But it's about a situation that everyone you talk to in the city had the same questions. What are the rules surrounding this? So I filed it, looked for an update, and I mean, at the end of the day, there's a double standard. We're gonna have a conversation here, but if it impacts the ability or one of my associates or friends or someone that I'm personally know, I don't want to have that conversation now. It's why wouldn't we? And then it's funny, Sunday, Richard Howell comes out with a general ruling on Mass General Law that would govern some of this stuff. The solicitor could have easily just replied and said, you know, this is the section of Mass General Law that covers this stuff, and for specific information, reach out to ethics.
And yet that's exactly what happened. The process was followed. Councilor Leahy shared that ethics ruling, which he apparently he got it in a phone call, but to kind of put to bed some of this, you know, disagreement over whether it's ethical, it's okay with the Ethics Commission. You know, we can argue about perception or whatever, but we now have a ruling that says, yeah, you can do it. You just have to resign within 30 days.
And that's
and that was what everybody said. This isn't the solicitor's decision. This is it's a case-by-case basis by the Ethics Commission, which tends to be inconsistent. Let's be honest with you. Folks have brought up as a result of this, folks said, well, what about Riddy Young back in 1990, whatever? But that's the Ethics Commission being, if they can't give you hard and fast rules, how do you expect the city solicitor to do so?
I wasn't looking for her for the solicitor to make a ruling. I was looking for what is the information surrounding are there required cool-off periods. I'm not expecting him to rule on a specific case. And again, it was never personalized to that point. Everyone else personalized it because there was a counselor going through that situation. But in January, there was no counselor going through that situation.
Well, Johnny Dakota was kind of going through a different degree of it.
No, but that was resolved. And that was the reason I brought this forward back then. Councilor Dakota's was resolved. And I said, we just struggled with working our way through this direction of it with a employee coming onto the council, can we get some information on the opposite direction before we need it? A council going as an employee, the opposite 180 of what we just worked through. Nobody was involved in that current kind of situation when that motion was brought forward. And then 5 months later, it's like, oh, wait a minute, this is a personal attack.
Because there have been other back and forths in between those 5 months with that counselor.
With the,
right. So to be fair to you, that I believe it was Councilor Leahy who made a comment about the junior counselor or junior district counselor. I believe that was back in the last term, which was, I believe, directed at you. And it was interesting to me that you made a reference in your text to Councilor Dakota about a junior counselor, which I kind of took as a dig at Councilor Leahy.
No. I said as a freshman counselor.
But you were called a junior counselor, I believe.
And again, that's something that you might be remembering, but that's not something that, like, a junior counselor.
So that didn't come up when you were saying that?
No, absolutely not.
There was a question about ethics involving the business dealings of a counselor's spouse.
Yeah, absolutely, because ethics governs so many areas. And I mean, how can we try to hold certain rules and hold people accountable in certain areas and try to follow certain rules for ethical practices in certain areas, but then we're willing to bend and flex and adjust those rules when we're seeking certain outcomes. I mean, I can only wait to see what happens with the replacement discussion that's going to be going on now, because you can tell. And I mean, I'll go on record and explain, like, I in no way, shape, or form think it's right for Centerville's district rep to appoint who's going to represent Belvedere. Our residents should have it. We're taking the democracy part of it right away from our voting public and saying we know better than you do in this instance, and we're going to appoint.
I agree with you, except this has been something you guys have been called on for years. I did it back in the radio days. I did it around election time when it struck me that, okay, everybody's in competitive races now in 2021, but come 2023, there might be some unopposed candidates. The moment that Andy Dakota had to step down from the school committee and the replacement was automatically done per the old rules, I again said, you guys better figure it out, because you're going to have a scenario where there isn't even a Susie Chun who ran and finished second.
You have.
Lo and behold, it happened, and we still don't have anything. And as I understand the charter, as I read it in my very limited knowledge, and Lord knows what any ruling would come down, right now, unless that home rule petition passes, you guys can't even do a special election. So how are you going to appoint the replacement?
I really think
it's got to be the council.
I think shame on those that carved that out. I voted no on it, on that home rule petition and on those changes, because why are we always trying to reinvent the wheel? I've always said, if we're looking for language, why wouldn't we follow Worcester's model? Planning government with district representation, at-large representation, already approved by the Secretary of State's office, and there's no appointment piece in that. It's if it's within first year, special election. Or it might even be first year and a half, special election. 6 months, you have the decision to leave it vacant or special election. And it's carves out for district, and it would be runner-up as well. In the instance, if there's no runner-up, I believe the council over there has 30 days from the date they're notified from the election commission that there's no runner-up or anyone eligible to take that seat. You call for a special election. Sure. It's already been approved. And I think if we would have submitted something along those lines, it's already in place in practice. You
guys submitted something in 2022 or 2023, or maybe both years, and it didn't call for a special election. You were on that council. How did you vote on that?
There was a submission from, I believe, a state delegation member. I don't believe the city council carved out anything at that point. There was already something working its way through the House, I believe, that one of the state reps put forward.
So that wasn't put forward by the council?
No, I don't believe so.
Okay.
Nope.
Why didn't you guys address it back then?
That's a great question.
Why were talk radio hosts pushing forward and bloggers, but the council didn't?
That's a great question. But I mean, when we did try to put something forward, instead of following something that was already accepted and approved, they went and tried to reinvent the wheel. And I think I haven't even seen the recommendations that came back on the changes or why it didn't go through. But Why wouldn't we try to follow something that was already approved by another community that follows the same kind of plan that we follow?
If you guys eventually get to a point where there's special rules for special elections are in place, I'll applaud you all. I hope you get there, because now you're going to have a situation where I can already see the next area of battle, how you're going to go about replacing Councilor Leahy on July 24th.
Yeah,
I can see that coming. Final note, and this goes back to the kind of the politics of it and whatnot, and the acrimony. I noticed an interesting Facebook post from you. I can't remember which one it was, but it was something praising something that happened with an open space or whatever, and how a situation was rectified relatively quickly. Yep. And in there were the words, I'm going to paraphrase you, but you basically said, I don't always say it the right way, but these folks are doing. Is that an admission from you that maybe it's time to kind of turn the page and get to a way where you guys can kind of find some common ground and not have some of the back and forth on social media, or the types of posts that lead to that back and forth?
What that basically is, what you're referring to is again, when I criticize services not being provided effectively, or I criticize work that hasn't been done, that's one side. But I also truly believe in praising when the work is done. And so it's the good and the bad. And as I said, sometimes the way that I'll go about calling out an issue, it might come off the wrong way. And again, no one's perfect. I'll be the first to admit it. But I also recognize the value of praising on the other side of that coin when the job is done right. And so it's a balance. I mean, again, there's no textbook on how to do the role I'm in, or perform in the role I'm in. And I learn every day. So yes, some of my criticisms come off abrasive sometimes. And I also am mindful enough to try to balance that with the praise that's deserved in many areas. And briefly, our employees, it's not finger pointing at our employees. So the people responsible for going out and maintaining our parks, they don't walk in the door every morning and decide what they're doing that day and just have at it. Like, again, we need a better organizational structure, I believe, and we need clear, defined expectations and roles and responsibilities in many areas, and then we need accountability to enforce all that.
All right. I think I'm going to end it there. That's a relatively positive note.
Yeah.
All right. I appreciate you taking the time to come in here. And I know there was, at the very beginning, there were questions asked that I'm sure you don't want.
Oh, no.
And you can't deal with for legal reasons. I fully understand that. I just had to ask.
And I appreciate you allowing to sit down. And again, like I said, ever since we've started talking, you've always been very fair, very reasonable, and you offer opportunity. And I appreciate that. Thank you.
City Councilor Corey Robinson, thank you so much for joining us. Thank all of you for joining us as well here on this latest Inside Lowell podcast. As we like to say, Inside Lowell. If Lowell is your home, this is your place. Until next time, be safe.